Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Conversations in the Future of Work. I am your host, Rachel Cossar, and I'm thrilled to be focusing on powering accessibility in the modern workforce. We're dealing with a lot of different workforce formats, whether it's fully in person, fully remote, or a hybrid of both. And thinking about accessibility is and has always been a big priority. And so I'm very excited to have Alex Dunn, founder of Cephable, with us today. Alex.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're go ahead if you want to just share a little bit with our audience.
Yeah, so I'm Alex Dunn. I'm the founder and CEO of Cephable. My background's mostly in product development and applied machine learning, and for the last sort of 5 years, been mostly focused on accessibility and assistive tech, both in play and in work and home and sort of everywhere else. But anywhere where you're touching digital tech, trying to make that a bit easier, level the playing field for everyone, and create some sort of fun and engaging experiences too.
Awesome. So this whole space I find fascinating because I would imagine that technology really does open up some amazing opportunities for this group of people. And I'd love to know, in what ways does our new world of work, right, with these more flexible terms of engagement as professionals, make it easier for individuals who are neurodivergent to express and connect?
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways. I think being in a hybrid environment, especially, well, I guess not every company is, but for companies that are in some form of a hybrid environment, having a virtual space where people can bring themselves to meetings, to sessions, to conversations in a way that works best for them is super important. We've seen sort of the advent of stuff like avatars in the sort of virtual conferences and things like that, which is really cool. Things like within Microsoft Teams that you can set up your own avatar. And we've got a lot of feedback from folks that use that to represent themselves in ways that they want to express, even if they have a hard time sort of expressing themselves on camera, or they just don't feel comfortable on camera, and still sort of having that like somewhat face to face, I'd say, is really cool. But I think it's really about just bringing yourself in whatever way you want that to be to your team and to your work environment and to the sort of greater internet as a whole. I think the advent of AI and sort of the pretty quick adoption of it also creates a really interesting space to make work easier for folks that are neurodivergent. Whether it's just trying to explain something in a different way that might be easier to understand, or having something explained back to you in a way that you understand better, and sort of having that like really personalized experience that, for a long time was challenging to achieve in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to think of our devices as an extension of ourselves. And so I would imagine that in that sense, with some of this more cutting edge advanced technology, like that be, and especially with the work you're doing at Cephable, there's this degree, as you said, of personalization where these individuals, where any individual can really make choices that really make sense for them.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, even if it's simple things like with Cephable, we're a software platform. Our focus is like giving you the means to set up controls that work best for you. So whether it's like you have a hard time with a keyboard and mouse and you want to use adaptive voice controls or camera-based controls, or having an easier set of buttons on your phone that you can tap to like automate certain things. Basically, it's simple instances like being on a Teams call or a Zoom call and just saying like, well, when I lean away from the camera, I want that to mute me, so I'm feeling like I'm naturally disengaging from the conversation, and having Cephable's AI to sort of set up those controls for you. Or when you lean back in to unmute you. We see a lot of sort of like simple interactions in terms of like pairing up functionality to like these sort of digital controls, having like a really impactful setup for an individual, because it's about personalizing your own experience in the end. And when you have the means to personalize it without having to go through and like manage all these wild configurations, you can kind of just talk to your computer essentially, or to any of your devices the way that you want to. It really frees up the sort of learning curves of new apps. It frees up the frustrations that you might face in trying to interact with different pieces of technology, and ultimately just makes things more fun and engaging and really more productive too.
Yeah, and on that point, like from my dancer mind, I'm like, it's I think it's always beneficial when you can engage more of yourself in whichever capacities, whether it's more voice, more vocals, more nonverbals, more movements, in this otherwise relatively two-dimensional world.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's really cool. So, I mean, that all sounds very positive. What are some of the challenges you see?
Yeah, I think there's always challenges in virtual environments with trying to feel connected, and trying to maintain what otherwise can be a sort of that two-dimensional face of someone versus a three-dimensional person, and not seeing all of who they are in context. Those are definitely some of the places that are challenging. On more of like the technology side, it's like there's so many different tools in the toolboxes that you have to manage as well, and also trying to figure out really what works best for you as an individual. So it's whether it's finding the right assistive technology to be able to stay productive and connective, and having to configure that or have someone support you in configuring that. That can be frustrating, or even just like general business productivity tools, like managing all those things.
Mhm.
One of the, for example, like this sort of staying connected and getting past like the two-dimensional person on camera, to the real sort of three-dimensional or four-dimensional person in terms of personality and context. That we sort of focus on from even our internal team, is trying to find ways to connect in person when we can,
Yeah.
for folks that are comfortable with it. Of course, like that connection in person isn't always a comfortable experience for everyone. So it's about that, like setting up flexibility for our own team members, whether it's, hey, we're gonna be at this event. Let's bring in some folks that might not even be participating in this trade show or conference or event, but just have some time to connect with the other team members who are there. Or
Yeah.
we do like these sort of larger everybody get together sort of offsites, stuff like that too.
Right. Yeah, I know you had mentioned that right before we started. So I'd love to hear, and I'm sure our audience would as well. Like, what are some of the creative ways that Cephable, as a remote first company, has designed those meetings of the minds physically?
Yeah, I think there's a cadence in the virtual meetings that's important to maintain, so everyone sort of knows, one, like have your videos on when you can, when you're comfortable. Like we see a lot, especially like we sell B2B software, we interact with a lot of other enterprises and stuff too. And you can just feel how disconnected it is when like nobody joins with their camera on, and it's like the, I'd say, the olden days of like 5 years ago, where you'd sit on a conference call with like a conference phone in a room and
Yeah.
not talk to people, and it's like you lose so much connection there. And especially if you're doing that internally with your team members that you work with every day, it's just like you can kind of chip away at that connection pretty harshly. So we sort of start there, like, hey, if we're going to be all remote, let's make sure that when we are connecting, we're fully present. We're not, doing a whole bunch of other things while also talking. And so therefore, we also need to be intentional about like when we are asking for people's full attention. We do have this sort of like, we call it our chair turning methodology, which is like when you are in an office, we like to set up this culture of like you can just turn your chairs around and talk to each other,
Mm.
and trying to sort of recreate that in a virtual way where it's like, hey, I need help with something, like throw your hand up, raise the flag, and like be able and willing to just jump on a call, and sort of have that openness, and like let everyone sort of know what's going on, and that sort of awareness across the team. But that only goes so far. So like we can do things like virtual game nights, and those are fun, but we still find that at least everybody on our team, and of course every team is different, still finds a ton of value in connecting in person. And so we do these twice a year offsites where we fly everybody in the company to a specific place, and it changes. Like we've done some in Maine, some in Massachusetts. We just came back from the San Juan Islands in Washington, where everybody is sort of bringing their full selves. We're in a room together for like most of a week, if not all week. We're mixing like doing fun things together versus strategy sessions and working sessions. And there's a level of trust that's built, when you do have that time together.
Mm.
That's hard to maintain when you're completely remote all the time. And like perceiving how someone is talking to you, their intentions and their personal context can be very different if you're just seeing them in that sort of 2D face on camera, or even worse, if it's just chat and that's sort
Mm.
of it, right? So it's our way to build trust within the team, also just get stuff done. Like we sort of focus it around bigger things that are coming out, whether it's whole new product offerings that we're working on, or different changes in business strategy that's coming up, to make sure like everyone is heard in those sessions, everyone feels like they have a place to speak, and they can also just not feel like they're out of the loop on anything either.
Right. It's so refreshing to hear the level of intentionality that you and your partners have brought to the table with this. I think that's oftentimes what's missing is, understandably, there tends to be like a knee-jerk reaction to some of these work policy settings, where it becomes pretty all or nothing.
Mhm.
And the nothing side is like, well, then you can't work here.
Yeah. I mean, like from my perspective, like building a team is hard, right? Because
Yeah.
you want to build the best team that you can. And the way we approach it is we take a lot of time to find the right people that are going to bring the best value to the company, to the product, to our users, especially, and sort of understand the context of working in the space of individuals with disabilities.
Mhm.
And basically going from trying to find the right team members to building the successful companies, you have to make sure they're as comfortable and as productive and as happy as you can. And so like a big part of my job is just making sure as we're building the team that every person has whatever they need in order to be successful.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean that in the sense of like assistive technology, for example. I mean like whatever sort of means it is for them to feel connected and productive and happy while they're doing things that are impactful to people.
Yeah.
It maintains that impact that we're making. That's ultimately our goal. Like we want to impact the lives of folks with disabilities and level the playing field for people in work and in play and in schools. And so it takes a lot of work to do that. And so it also takes a lot of making sure everyone's happy doing that work the whole time too.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot of like explicit, uh, you can't leave anything up to kind of people's assumptions, like
Right.
everything has to be made explicitly clear. Expectations have to be set, as you mentioned, in terms of those internal teams. Like, we'll be intentional with asking for your time, and then also asking that you do show up, as appropriate with your video. And I think there's also this thing that I've noticed, and I think it mostly comes out of the pandemic, where like everything was a video meeting, right? And we went
Mhm.
so overboard with this requirement to be on video all the time that now it's like internal meetings are somehow viewed as like lesser than,
Yeah.
well, this is an internal meeting, I'm not going to turn my video on, it doesn't matter, or whatever.
Right.
And you're like, no, like to your point, like these are the people who you have to work with and partner with and collaborate with and trust.
Yeah, 100%. And it's even worse, I think, when people are in external meetings and they're still just like no video, and I'm just
Right.
like the one guy on video. It's
Oh my
funny,
God.
but it's
Yeah,
so uncomfortable at times. But it's like I still want them to know that I'm bringing that intention.
totally.
Yeah, I mean, like internally, like to some extent, those are the most important meetings you're having. Like that's when decisions are made. That's when stuff gets done, and it's with the people that you're making those decisions with and the people you're getting stuff done with. So
Yeah.
why not bring your full self?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if you ever experienced this, but we experience this with our users of Virtual Sapiens, where there's this like level of expectation around AI where it's like people expect it to be magical all the time. Like, and if something doesn't work or if it like malfunctions or hallucinates, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe it did that. And it's like, well, it's very much in like
Yeah.
a like advanced technology that we're all trying to figure out. So what are some of the current limits with AI in your opinion?
A lot. So, I
Yeah,
mean, we're an AI software company in
yeah,
both I would say the traditional sense from like 4 years ago. We do a lot of machine learning, but we
yeah.
also use generative AI in a few different ways. Both like internally as like our own productivity tools with like
Mhm,
ChatGPT and
mhm.
Copilot and stuff, but also like within our actual app experience. I mean, like our goal is that you're talking to Cephable and you're basically just telling your computer what you want it to do, and Cephable just kind of does it for you. All of that is a whole bunch of AI stuff behind the scenes, from like handling your speech recognition or tracking your different face movements, and then applying that intention towards doing something, and automating that and figuring out like, hey, you're in this app. For example, you're in Microsoft Word and you're trying to say save. Well, what do I need to actually do? I need to like hit a keyboard shortcut, or I need to go through the menu and find something, and doing that level of automation.
Mhm.
So even in like that story, which is like obviously that's the happy path. For
Yeah,
like I mentioned earlier, if I lean back, I want to mute myself in my Zoom call, or I want to say save, or I want to be able to tap a button and have it like go through my common tasks. Like there's a lot of edge cases where that can start to fall apart. And
mhm.
honestly, the main reason why I feel like, to your point, some people find this sort of like magic in AI, and then the magic is gone when you see it fail,
Yeah,
is I think there's a general lack of understanding on like how these types of models work,
totally.
and the applications of them, because we've started to see I think a lot of it's because developers have seen the magic of like, I gave it text and it gave me text back that I was expecting. Therefore, I can turn this into anything I want. Where a lot of applications are applying it and I mean specifically generative AI and text generation in ways that like aren't text generation. And so you're trying to sort of force a model that its whole job is saying, what is the next letter that I need to actually spit out? And then it's turned into chat, but that chat is still just predicting, like in a conversation like this, what would be the next thing that I would expect to see. And that's kind of all it does. And so when it starts to make stuff up, it's either because it's hitting context window limits, it's a limit of the model itself, or it's pulling from information and training that you didn't necessarily expect it to have. And now we do a lot of work with on-device AI, which means we're even more limited because we're not working with like big data centers. We're working on like your laptop or your phone. So the processing that we can do, has its own limits as well. But, we were starting to play with some new versions of generative controls. And the way we use generative AI is we say like, hey, you opened up Word. I'm going to go generate a set of controls behind the scenes that you can use. It's not necessarily like a chatbot. But it might say like, hey, I saw that you opened Microsoft Word, so I'm going to go set up all of these controls for Microsoft Word so that you can say save and I know what to do. So it kind of does that on the fly and ahead of time. But we, for example, work with smaller generative models, or I guess SLM, small language models, even though they're still gigantic, that can run on devices.
Yeah.
And we've seen just like some ridiculous stuff. Like I was trying to test this newer model, and I won't name and shame it. I was testing this newer model to create controls for PowerPoint, which is like one of our staples. It's one of the most common things that our users do, whether intentionally or behind the scenes. And it started to do it, and I was like, oh, here's like new slide and like the process that it should go through. And then it just started writing about a debate on the ethics of lying, which I found extremely ironic, but also is like, like something is off here.
Totally.
So I think there's hard limits. There's hard limits in AI on processing power, right? For offline AI, we have a lot of more advancement lately with like neural processing units being built into like Copilot Plus PCs and AI PCs, neural engines being built into Mac M2, M3, M4 chips, things like that. But then there's also the soft limits that from like a consumer of AI's perspective, like you don't necessarily see until you hit it. And then it's like, well, now what do I do? What would I like to see improve the most, I think, is a little bit more on like education on how AI works from like the general population and understanding like what the limits are, so that as we push the limits, someone now knows what it can do. And I definitely would like to see more hardware that we can basically use for on-device processing. I mean, in the end, it means we can build more private and more personalized AI. You don't have to give your data to one of the big tech giants that's processing that against the model. You can just use your computer and chat to your AI and generate things that you need to. But definitely education is the big thing. That's the biggest missing gap, I think.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that with one of our newer clients. Organization-wide, they have a push to have people be exposing themselves to different applications of AI and becoming familiar with it and understanding some of those boundaries, the limits of it. And it's so interesting because I think now at least people are pretty familiar with like ChatGPT as this like conversation kind of application of AI, Gen AI, and which is great. And it's just so interesting. Like I was thinking, it could be interesting for Virtual Sapiens in our capacity of working with the individuals across this organization to also give maybe some educational content in terms of helping them understand what's going on behind the scenes with the computer vision models and application of AI as a coach, you know? Because I do think like even some of the stuff you're talking about in terms of on-device processing versus server side and, where is your data? For people to understand that is it's just very important.
Definitely. I mean, it's data privacy and data protection in the end, and it's being aware of where your data is going and what it's being used for.
Right. Because it can just feel so like, I mean, it's just so like in the cloud, like it's so atmospheric, But yeah, I saw this video the other day. It was so funny of this AI that it's known for being more like emotionally intelligent, but it just started the conversation like, laughing like a maniac for like 5 seconds.
Is that not how you start every conversation?
Oh my God, it was so amazing. I was like, this is just incredible, man. So, but yeah, I mean, we'll get there eventually,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it definitely improves very quickly.
Yeah. So what is, I mean, you've shared a little bit about this, but just to cap us off, like what's your long-term vision for Cephable?
I mean, our mission is to basically make it so that you could walk or roll up to any piece of technology and just interact with it in a way that works best for you. If you have a hard time with a physical input, whether it's a touchscreen, a keyboard, a mouse, a stylus, whatever it is, to have an alternative, but to also do that in a way that's not just like some niche assistive technology that is so generally available that you can do that. You can just open up a PC or walk up to an ATM and have it know who you are and be able to interact with you the way that you want to.
Yeah.
A big thing that we see in the space of assistive technology is just how much work is put on the individual with a disability to like get anything to work for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a big gap that we're trying to fill. And there's a few different approaches to it. There's like get developers to make their stuff compliant with basic accessibility standards, which is like, we should do that, but it's still kind of a failing thing right now because it's existed for like 10 years and over 95% of like websites don't meet basic requirements. It's like those types of things we have to continue to do, but it feels like there's an opportunity to fill that gap quicker by empowering individuals to personalize their experiences on the go.
Yeah.
I think, the way we've been sort of going about seeing that through has been really intentional. Like we started with very specific, like we want to know how users want to interact with their machines, with their apps, with their games, with their connected apps. So like meetings and things like that too. And to sort of not just make assumptions around that user experience and to see as we start to introduce a little bit more automation, a little bit more of like new types of inputs, like how does that change? And so we've sort of done that in a very, again, intentional way, but where an individual is like manually mapping configurations. They're saying like, when I say click, I want it to click. And you're sort of building that configuration out initially. Then we built ways to automate on top of that after seeing ways that people wanted to interact. And now we're sort of looking at that next stage of, we can generate controls for you on the fly. So you can just say like open Word and it's got word control set up for you and you're good to go. But into like, how do we do that in a place where, you haven't signed in and personalized this whole thing for yourself. And it's a new device or a new app or a new game or new piece of technology to understand who you are while also maintaining that who you are in an extremely private way. That's not like Cephable's managing information about you.
Right.
So that's sort of where we're heading is like taking those steps to like build the best personalization and understanding context, build the best controls and automation on top of it, and basically bring those together. And then working with our partners like different PC builders from HP and Lenovo and Dell and Microsoft and some of the mobile device makers to basically enable this stuff out of the box so that really can just like pull up whatever hardware it is and it's got you. From there, and it knows who you are without having to give your data away.
Yeah. Wow. That's the holy grail. That's amazing.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're making really good progress on it too. A little bit faster than we expected, I think.
Wow. That's amazing. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and experience. It's been fascinating. How can people follow your work, connect with you?
Yeah, so we're just at cephable.com, CEPHABLE. On all socials, we're on Cephable, or at Cephable, I should say. If you want to find me on LinkedIn or you want to reach out to me via email, I'm just Alex at Cephable, or you can just look up Alex Dunn Cephable. I'm sure you'll find me somewhere. We've got ways to try our stuff out. If you're interested in trying it for your personal use, it's totally free. If you got folks on your team that are interested in trying it out, we've got really easy to set up, 30-day free trials. If you're a developer that wants to try to add these things to your own experiences, we've got SDKs and tools for that too. So we ultimately just want to build the most accessible place we can, and we'd love to connect with whoever's interested in doing that too.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you again. And as always, thanks to our audience for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.